Hello and welcome. This is Yon Cheku with NSM TV bringing you the latest news. US President Donald Trump has called on allies, especially European countries, to help reopen the Strait of Hormuz and warned of serious consequences for NATO if support is not provided. He also threatened to postpone a summit with Xi Jinping if China refuses to offer assistance. Other countries, including Australia, Japan, and most European states, have so far shown little willingness to respond to his request. US President Donald Trump has stepped up pressure on international allies, calling for assistance to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most critical routes for global oil transportation. In an interview with the Financial Times, Trump warned that if countries benefiting from the strait fail to provide help, it could have very negative consequences for the future of NATO. He also threatened to postpone a planned summit with Xi Jinping, stressing that China relies heavily on Middle Eastern oil and should contribute to ensuring the free flow of energy supplies. The US president added that he would remember whether allies, including the United Kingdom and Prime Minister Keir Starmer, support the war effort or not. However, many countries remain reluctant. Australia has rejected sending warship, Japan has no similar plans, and China has criticized the US war against Iran. Several European countries have also shown little willingness to become involved, raising doubts about the effectiveness of Trump's warnings. Meanwhile, the conflict continues without a clear end in sight. Israel has expanded operations in Lebanon. Iraqi militias have signaled a new phase of attacks against US forces, and oil prices have climbed above $105 per barrel for Brent crude. The international situation remains tense as it remains to be seen how Donald Trump will respond if allies refuse to participate in the strategic operation. Canadian Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has unveiled a new plan for Canada's auto industry. The strategy aims to boost domestic productions and secure tariff-free access to the U.S. market. The proposal comes at a time of trade tensions between Canada and the United States following economic policies introduced by Donald Trump's administration. Germany has officially rejected U.S. President Donald Trump's request for military support in the conflict against Iran. Speaking from Berlin, German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius said his country will not take part in military operations, emphasizing that Germany remains committed to diplomatic solutions. According to Pistorius, Germany is prepared to contribute to ensuring the security of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz through diplomacy and international cooperation, but not through military engagement. He added that any decision for such intervention would require an international framework and approval from the German parliament, the Bundestag. The German defense minister also questioned the effectiveness of a limited European military presence in the region, noting that even a small fleet of frigates would have little impact compared with the naval power of the United States. Pistorius stressed that the conflict is not a war started by Germany, and that Berlin's priority remains achieving a diplomatic solution and bringing the confrontation to an end as soon as possible. He also responded to Trump's warnings that NATO's future could suffer if allies fail to support Washington. Pistorius said he does not believe these disagreements will lead to the collapse of the alliance, underlining that member states continue to fulfill their obligations, particularly on NATO's eastern flank and in strategically important northern regions. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer says the United Kingdom will not be drawn into a wider war against Iran. He also announced a £53 million support package to help families most affected by rising energy prices. According to Starmer, stabilizing global energy markets is directly linked to reopening the Strait of Hormuz. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer says Britain will not be drawn into a wider war against Iran as tensions in the Middle East continue to escalate. Speaking at a press conference in London, Starmer said the British government will take steps to protect its citizens and avoid further escalation of the conflict. He stressed that Britain will continue to defend its interests and allies, but will not be pulled into a broader regional war. The Prime Minister also said London will continue working towards a swift diplomatic solution to restore stability and security in the region. Starmer announced concrete measures to help British families facing rising living costs as a result of the conflict. The government will provide a support package worth £53 million for vulnerable households that rely on oil for heating, as prices have risen sharply. Among other measures, the government has introduced a temporary cap on energy bills until the end of June, saving households an average of around £117. Fuel tax reductions have also been extended until September, and a new platform has been launched allowing drivers to see real-time fuel prices at different stations. The British Prime Minister emphasized that stabilizing global energy markets is closely linked to reopening the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most important corridors for transporting oil and gas. Starmer concluded by saying that ending the war in the Middle East is the fastest way to reduce living costs and restore economic stability. He also said Britain will continue supporting Volodymyr Zelensky and Ukraine, warning that the conflict in the Persian Gulf must not become a strategic advantage for Vladimir Putin. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi says Tehran has not requested a ceasefire and has not exchanged messages with the United States. He says the war between the United States and Israel against Iran must end in a way that prevents it from happening again in the future. Araghchi also says the Strait of Hormuz remains open to navigation, except for countries, he says, have carried out aggression against Iran. Iran says it has not requested a ceasefire and has had no communication with the United States regarding an end to the conflict. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, speaking at a press conference in Tehran, said his country wants the war to end, but in a way that prevents it from happening again in the future. According to him, Iran has sent no messages to Washington and has not sought an immediate halt to the fighting. Araghchi said the conflict should end through a solution that guarantees long-term security for Iran. The Iranian foreign minister also commented on statements made by U.S. President Donald Trump, who had called for the creation of an international coalition to ensure the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most important maritime routes for global trade. In response, Araghchi said that from Iran's perspective, the strait remains open to international navigation and trade. However, he warned that it is closed to countries that, according to Tehran, have carried out unjust aggression against Iran and to their allies. His remarks come at a time of heightened tension in the region, as clashes between Iran and U.S. allies continue to raise concerns about security in the Middle East and the stability of one of the world's most important energy corridors. Iran's women national football players, who made headlines a few days ago after requesting asylum in Australia, have now changed their minds. They have declined to remain in the country that offered them asylum and have decided to return home. The team is expected to regroup in Malaysia before returning to Iran to reunite with their families. A fifth member of Iran's women's national football team, who had requested asylum in Australia, has decided to return to Iran. Australian media report that several other players have also rejected the humanitarian asylum offer that Australia made last week. The Australian government had granted humanitarian visas to 6 players and 1 member of the support staff following concerns that they could face prosecution in Iran. These concerns arose after some players did not sing the national anthem during a match at the Women's Asian Cup. 3 members of the delegation had earlier decided not to accept asylum, while other players changed their mind last week, leaving only 2 players in Australia. Australia's Minister for Education, Jason Clare, said the decision to stay or leave was entirely up to the players, noting that the government had simply offered humanitarian visas. The players who declined asylum are now expected to reunite with the rest of the team in Malaysia before returning to Iran to reunite with their families and their country. The Iranian team's matches in the Asian Cup began during a tense period, shortly after airstrikes by the United States and Israel against Iran. The team was eliminated from the tournament 1 week ago. Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney has arrived in London for bilateral meetings with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Starmer welcomed Carney and thanked Canada for its invaluable support for Ukraine. The meeting also included discussions on the impact of the Strait of Hormuz closure on international shipping and the situation in the Middle East. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney met British Prime Minister Keir Starmer in London at Downing Street. Starmer welcomed Carney, wished him a happy birthday, and praised Canada's continued support for Ukraine as invaluable. The meeting highlighted the historic ties and shared values between the two countries, including cooperation through the Coalition of the Willing and NATO. Carney thanked Starmer for his leadership with the coalition and stressed the importance of international cooperation in addressing global challenges, including security and trade. According to a Downing Street spokesperson, Monday's meeting also addressed the impact of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz on international shipping. The leaders agreed to continue discussions on the conflict in the Middle East. The meeting represents a joint effort to strengthen bilateral relations and address global challenges during a period of heightened international tensions. Kenya's foreign minister says Moscow and Nairobi have agreed that Kenyan citizens will no longer be recruited to fight in Ukraine. The decision follows talks with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Kenyan authorities say they will provide consular services to affected citizens and aim to stop illegal recruitment for the war. Kenyan citizens will no longer fight for Russia and Ukraine following an agreement between the governments of Kenya and Russia. The announcement was made by Kenya's Foreign Minister Musalia Mudavadi after a meeting with his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov in Moscow. Mudavadi said Kenyan citizens will no longer be eligible for recruitment through Russia's Ministry of Defense, and that no new enlistments will be allowed. He added that Kenyan authorities will provide consular services to any citizen who needs assistance through diplomatic channels. According to a Kenyan intelligence report, more than 1,000 Kenyan citizens have been recruited to fight in Ukraine, 5 times more than previously estimated. Politicians in Nairobi have denounced what they describe as a network of state officials working with human trafficking syndicates to recruit Kenyans. The government says it is determined to put an end to this practice. The agreement is expected to resolve a sensitive issue and protect Kenyan citizens from unauthorized involvement in foreign conflicts. Former French President Nicolas Sarkozy is returning to the Paris Court of Appeal to challenge his conviction in the case involving alleged Libyan financing of his 2007 presidential campaign. In the initial trial, Sarkozy was sentenced to 5 years in prison, a €100,000 fine, and banned from holding public office for 5 years. Former French President Nicolas Sarkozy has appeared before the Paris Court of Appeals in one of the most high-profile political and legal cases in France in recent years. The appeal trial regarding the alleged Libyan financing of his 2007 presidential campaign began on March 16th and is expected to continue until June 3rd. In September 2025, Sarkozy was found guilty by a lower court and sentenced to 5 years in prison, a fine of €100,000, and a 5-year ban from holding public office. He lost his voting rights for the same period. The former head of state spent 20 days in Paris's La Santé prison before being released from pretrial detention in November 2025. Prosecutors say funds from the regime of former Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi may have been used to support Sarkozy's presidential campaign. The former president has consistently denied the accusations. a total of 11 people are on trial in the appeal case, including several of Sarkozy's closest associates. Among them are former minister and close advisor Claude Gaunt, who was sentenced to 6 years in prison, and former minister Brice Hordafa. The case also involves intermediaries, financiers, and businessmen suspected of playing a role in transferring the funds. Meanwhile, several other defendants, including Sarkozy's former campaign treasurer Eric Worth, were acquitted in the initial trial. The appeal proceedings are expected to shed further light on one of the biggest political scandals in France, while the final verdict could have significant consequences for Sarkozy's political legacy. 2 people have been arrested following incidents during a demonstration in downtown Toronto. The events took place during the Al-Quds Day rally, where counter-protesters were also present. Police say the 2 separate incidents are being investigated as suspected hate-motivated offenses. 2 men are facing criminal charges after incidents that occurred during an Al-Quds Day rally held over the weekend in Toronto. According to Toronto police, the protest took place near University Avenue and Armory Street, where counter-protesters were also present. Authorities say 2 separate incidents during the event led to the arrests. In the first case, police say a counter-protester confronted a participant who was holding a stick with the flag of the Islamic Republic of Iran attached to it. Investigators say the suspect began striking the individual with his hands and fists, breaking the stick. Fragments from the broken stick then struck the victim in the head. Police arrested 56-year-old Farshid McVandifar of Toronto, who is charged with mischief under $5,000 and assault. He is scheduled to appear before the Ontario Court of Justice on Wednesday. A second incident involved another counter-protester who, according to police, followed a person wearing the flag of the Islamic Republic of Iran on their back. Investigators say the suspect spat on the victim and pulled the flag off their back before returning to the group of counter-protesters. Police later identified at the scene and say he was also seen setting an Iranian flag on fire while wearing similar flags attached to the soles of his shoes. Canadian Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has unveiled a new plan for Canada's auto industry. The strategy aims to boost domestic productions and secure tariff-free access to the U.S. market. The proposal comes at a time of trade tensions between Canada and the United States following economic policies introduced by Donald Trump's administration. Canadian opposition leader Pierre Poilievre has unveiled what he calls his most significant strategy yet for the country's auto industry. The plan promises to bring more manufacturing back to Canada while strengthening economic cooperation with the United States. During a visit to Windsor, Ontario, Poilievre said the automotive sector is vital to Canada's economy and that it must maintain reliable access to the American market in order to survive. According to his proposal, Canada should pursue a new agreement that would allow tariff-free trade in vehicles between the 2 countries. Poilievre also said the strategy aims to increase vehicle production in Canada to 2 million cars per year over the next decade. Another key element of the plan is eliminating the Federal Goods and Services Tax, or GST, on all vehicles manufactured in Canada. The proposal had previously been raised during the 2025 federal election campaign by both the Conservatives and the New Democrats. The announcement comes as Poilievre begins his first visit to the United States since the start of the trade dispute launched by U.S. President Donald Trump. Conservatives say the purpose of the trip is to convince American business leaders of the importance of trade relations between the 2 countries and the negative impact tariffs could have. A document made public on the program Când vështrim 360 grad on NSM TV has raised concerns about how some visa applications to Canada from citizens of Kosovo are being treated. According to the document, some applicants have been refused because of family ties to former members of the Kosovo Liberation Army. Lawyer Arnisa Morina describes this as a serious accusation and calls for a response from Kosovo's institutions. For more than 6 years, former leaders of the Kosovo Liberation Army have remained in detention at the specialist chambers in The Hague, where they face war crime charges and await a judicial verdict. Meanwhile, according to documents published on the program Këndvështrim 360 Grad on NSM TV with journalist Entela Baramaj, some citizens of Kosovo who have family connections with former KLA members are facing visa refusals when applying to travel to Canada. According to the documents, the reason for the refusal is linked to declarations in visa applications stating that a family member had been part of the KLA, which in the refusal explanation is described as a terrorist organization. Lawyer Arnisa Morina, who works in the field of immigration law and is a daughter of Kosovo war martyr Mehdi Morina, says she has encountered several such cases during her professional practice. According to her, entire families have been denied tourist visas simply because they declared in their applications that their parents had been members of the Kosovo Liberation Army. Morina says that beyond the issue of visa refusals, the bigger concern is the way the KLA is described in the refusal documents. She considers this as serious and offensive accusations against Albanians, particularly against the families of those who lost their lives during the Kosovo War. The lawyer has also called on Kosovo's institutions, including the embassy in Ottawa and the consulate in Toronto, to address the issue with Canadian immigration authorities. Albanian Prime Minister Edi Rama says he has never interfered in Kosovo's internal politics. He mocked attempts by some Kosovar politicians to influence political developments in Albania, describing them as ridiculous. Rama also spoke about support for former KLA leaders facing trial in The Hague and his relationship with Kosovo's Prime Minister, Albin Kurti. Albanian Prime Minister Edi Rama has denied ever taking an interventionist position in Kosovo's politics. Speaking during the latest episode of his podcast, Flasim, Rama said respecting Kosovo's internal affairs has always been one of his fundamental principles. He stressed that he has never wanted to interfere in political developments there and mocked attempts by some Kosovar politicians to influence Albania's political scene. According to Rama, such attempts were pointless and even ridiculous. Quote, "I have no position there in Kosovo. I never wanted to interfere in their affairs. I found it ridiculous when they tried to interfere here." Unquote. Adding that these efforts appear to have stopped once those involved realized they were ineffective. During the discussion with Professor Arjan Gjonçaj, the Albanian Prime Minister also addressed the issue of support for former KLA leaders currently on trial in The Hague. Professor Gjonçaj raised concerns about what he described as a lack of financial support from Kosovo's institutions for experts and specialists involved in defending the accused. Rama said he has discussed the matter with various individuals but has not addressed it directly with Kosovo's Prime Minister, Albin Kurti. According to him, one possible reason could have been concern about not placing additional pressure on Kosovo's government in relation to its international partners. This is all we have prepared for you today. Thank you for joining us.